This week's Parsha is Parshas Shemos. Parshas Shemos begins the story of the Egyptian exile, where the Jewish people were persecuted, oppressed, and basically totally abused in the country that was hosting them at that time, Egypt. How did this story start? What prompted the leader of Egypt to act the way he did, to subjugate the Jewish people? Of course, anti-Semitism does not need any introduction into Jewish history. It's happened over and over and over again. And not necessarily does there need to be any real reason. But there's always an excuse. There's always a rationalization why the Jewish people are being persecuted, why a certain nation decides the Jewish people need to be oppressed. What was the reason here? What did Paro, the king of Egypt, the leader of Egypt, decide? What was his reasoning behind persecuting the Jewish people? So the truth is that the verse says it really explicitly. It doesn't name it as the reason, but immediately prior to the discussion about the persecution, it has one verse that seems to be the linchpin to the persecution. The pasuk says, "U'bnei Yisrael paru vayishutzu vayirbu vayatzmu b'ma'od ma'od v'timaleh ha'aretz oisam." That the Jewish people became great in number, became very fruitful, many children, and they became strong, and they teemed. Which means basically the Jewish people became a presence in Egypt. And then the verse ends off with these key words, "Vatimale ha'aretz oisam," and the land became filled with them. The land became filled with Jewish people. The Medrash says that the Egyptians used to go to their theaters and they saw Jews in the theaters. They used to go to their circuses, they saw Jews at the circus. Everywhere they went, they saw Jews. And to them, that was a plague. So this was the linchpin of the Egyptian persecution. So because the Egyptian people, at every turn where they went, they saw another Jewish person, to them, they thought they were losing their identity. To them, the Egyptian people would no longer be the Egyptian people. And as is many times before, whenever there's a problem, all you have to do is persecute them. Beat them down until they no longer feel like they're an equal citizen, that they no longer have the equal rights of any other citizen. You're infringing, you're making it that an Egyptian is no longer Egyptian, and it seems like an Egyptian is now a Jewish person. For that, we're going to make sure that your lives will become extremely bitter. And you will be considered not only a second-class citizen, but a slave. And that was a rationalization in this case. What's very interesting is that the actual result was, the verse says, is that the Jewish people became even more numerous. And that's actually what Hashem was doing. Hashem was saying that you guys are trying to connive some plot to beat down the fact that the Jewish people are present in Mitzrayim and Egypt. But I'm going to do exactly the opposite. The more you oppress them, the more you subjugate them, the more they'll fill the land. The more they'll become encompassed in the entire land and become the Egyptian people. And this story of persecution, like we said, is a story that we've heard before, but of course there's a rationale, and this is the rationale. Now, like we said, this effort by Paro to beat down the Jewish people was actually unsuccessful, because the more he beat them down, the more they grew in number and in strength. So he had another idea. His second idea was that to eradicate the Jewish people, to remove their influence from Egypt, he will kill all male babies that are born. Because he saw in the future through constellations that the Jewish leader is going to be a male, and therefore he's going to kill all newly born male children. So he calls two people. He calls Amram's wife, who is actually Moshe's mother, and Amram's daughter. So it's interesting if you think about it for a second. You're talking about Yocheved and Miriam. Yocheved being Amram's wife, Moshe's mother, and Miriam being Moshe's sister. And these are the two people that are called to execute the program that Paro has instituted. Paro calls them in to tell them that he wants them to kill all Jewish males because they are the midwives who are in control of the birthing process, and therefore they will have accessibility to kill the firstborn children. Think about it for a second. What is Paro thinking? Paro obviously knows who Amram is. Amram was a leader of his Shevet, of his tribe. He had his name throughout, and he was a Gadol. He was a leader of that generation spiritually. And basically, Paro invites the Rebbetzin and her daughter into the chambers of his royal palace and asks them to kill all Jewish firstborn males. So why in the world, all Jewish males. So why in the world would he think that they would carry out his orders? No matter how influential he was, he had to know that the Rebbetzin, the wife of the leader of the generation, would never do that. What was he thinking, and why would he even have any thought initially that they would carry out his plan? Have a good Shabbos.